Hi, and welcome back to another episode of the Debate Legend series of the Policy Debate Central podcast. My name is Raleigh Maxwell, and today I'm joined by Josh Clark, Director of Debate at Montgomery Bell Academy. The goal of this series is to bring on guests who have left a significant impact on debate and talk to them about their experience in debate. Our guest today is Daryl Burch, who needs no introduction but deserves one nonetheless. As a debater, he saw success in both high school and college competing in the NDT elims. As a coach, he has seen similarly high levels of success coaching teams at Louisville and across the high school debate community. He has two TOC wins under his coaching belt, one with Capital Debate and the other with McDonogh in 2017. Thank you so much for being here with us today. We are super excited to have you.
Thank you.
Well, Daryl, we're hoping to kind of learn more about your background in debate, how you got the debate bug, and kind of what brought you to this activity.
So make a long story short, I was a sports fanatic and I got injured playing sports and then went to debate. And that happened in Kentucky and started my sophomore year in high school and just been on since there. Went to a Kentucky high school because my father was in the military. So I'm a military brat. And so he was stationed at Fort Knox. And from there, I turned down Yale, went to Louisville to debate on a debate scholarship, and just continued on through there.
In terms of your high school debate experience, was it mostly a local thing? Did you all get to go to any out of school tournaments? I also heard a rumor that you may or may not have carried a briefcase in high school. You can verify that.
Yeah, we used to have these things called ox boxes. I don't, yeah, and they're like big briefcases where we carried notebooks and everything, and we had card files too. So we carried these card file boxes. Um, but other than that, very simplistic. For 3 years I was in high school debate, and then went on to college, and then started coaching at DuPont Manual High School, which was right across the street from the University of Louisville, and then just took off from there.
I guess aside from obviously the fact that high school debate is now kind of digital, what do you think has been like the biggest change in high school debate since you were once a high school debater?
Oh God, that was huge. And I remember Jenny Height from Westminster was the first to put everything on the computer, and people not carrying the tubs around and carrying the ox boxes around. I mean that was huge, and I didn't think it was going to go over that well, but you know it's changed everything. So that was probably the biggest change.
Well, speaking to your college career, can you walk us through that? I assume you debated for 4 years at Louisville. Um, what was kind of your arc there? And do you have any battle stories or any favorite rounds you remember, or anything like that?
So it's kind of interesting, and a lot of people probably don't know this, but Scott Harris was a coach of debate at the University of Louisville and that's who recruited me. And Tim Hines was the coach and director of debate before Scott Harris, but Scott Harris had been there probably about maybe about a year, maybe 2 years, and then recruited me. And there was no critiques, believe it or not. And so like I never saw critiques until I started judging. And I really didn't have like a partner. The guy by the name of Ted Bixby was there, John Delicass was there, and Kevin Duddleton was supposed to be my partner when we came in, but Bixby left and transferred to a different school. And he transferred to Weber State. I don't know. And he was a big time debater, but John Delicath and Kevin Settleton debated together, and so I was kind of left without a partner for a long period of time. But me and Duddleton debated together my junior year, and then my senior year I debated with my old high school partner a little bit, and then I Scott left and went to Kansas, and Mike Ridge from Wake Forest came and coached. and Gordon Mitchell actually coached at Louisville for a year. And Gordon Mitchell was the last coach that I debated for, and then Mike Ridge was after him, and then I was kind of like assistant coaching, kind of like in my last year at the University of Louisville. Yeah.
Awesome. So what year did you graduate?
I graduated in 92. Yeah.
92.
Hmm.
Okay. All right. Well, take us from there. 1992, you're done there. You've kind of you've got a little bit of a coaching bug happening, given that your role on the team at that point, and then where does that take you?
Oh my God. So there's so much to go into. Because Louisville was kind of like wide open. And then Dr. Warner finally came to the University of Louisville. And I don't remember which year, it might have been a year or two afterwards, because a guy by the name of Karthik Chandramouli was a debater there. And he debated with Jeff Antle. And then they kind of like were debaters, kind of like co-coaches, like handled the budget and everything. So they really didn't have a coach. And then when Eddie came, it's kind of like when I got kind of back on board. But I was coaching DuPont Manual for a while, which was right across the street, and then traveling with them, and I worked for a bank for a little while, and then came back to Manual and started that back up. So there's like so many years that that fluctuated in between there. Um, but it was kind of interesting. I spent a lot of time at Louisville and then at Manual, and then from Manual I moved to Baltimore to take on the Baltimore Urban Debate League, and I coached for the Baltimore Urban Debate League for 2 years, and then went to Capital Debate under Ron Bratt, and then that's where the coups came from Centennial High School, and then from there I got a job at McDonogh, which is where I'm in, now.
Amazing. So which kind of, um, so we knew each other. We were in the same sphere when I was debating in college, around 2003 and 2004. In that era, how many consecutive years were you coaching at Louisville during that part?
So probably about 3 or 4 years. I was at Louisville, and that was with Liz and Tanya were there, and that's when Eddie kind of kind of rose to prominence. And you were at Fullerton, right? And when I remembered you debating there, and that was probably our most successful year. And then the second year, right after that, I think we probably would have been successful, but Ebony and Jennifer, I was like, they're only their third year debating ever. And so I thought they were pretty successful, even that year. But yeah.
And is that kind of when you talk like when did kind of your emphasis on critique debate kind of start? What was the thing that kind of sparked that, and how do you view that transition in terms of your debate pedagogy?
So so this is a real long story, but to kind of cut the story kind of short, is that like Dr. Warner, Eddie Warner was really big on bringing in music to debate, and bringing in like what he called organic intellectuals into the activity. And that was like, evidence is not always in written form. Sometimes it's song, sometimes it's poetry, and it can come from anybody that has an experience outside of like normal experience that you would have. And so, like on the Native American topic, he did a lot of poetry and did a lot of music, and I was kind of half and half into it. And then when he put me on as the program director, that's what they called the title. I was program director as a head coach of the team. Um, we kind of went to a new model of debate, and that's when Liz and Tanya were seniors, and that's how I think we were most successful. And we brought in the organic intellectuals and brought in music as a form of evidence, and that's what we called like alternative styles of debate. And that's where we came up with the term "you can't change the state, but you can change the state of debate." And all this stuff kind of flew into to fruition, and from there, just like sky was the limit, you know.
I did want to ask about that. I know like a lot of high schoolers have kind of like heard or thrown around the word like global debate, but don't really know a lot about its actual history. I guess, is there anything you'd like to explain to them? Maybe like, I don't know if there's like some misconceptions you've seen about kind of the goals of global debate or anything of that nature.
Well, one thing is like, and McDonogh kind of like uh was big on this. Ryan James and Nishad Neocondon were like big on the use of music as a form of evidence. It was just like if you read a card in debate and it's considered as a piece of evidence and you say it was dropped and you explain that evidence and it's from an author that's academic and you say their credentials. That's the same way you do an organic intellectual through a song. So like we would extend the song that was dropped. A lot of times you see like teams like would play music for the aesthetic value of it, but it doesn't really have a real input into the round. Like it doesn't really make an argument. But the type of music that I like to play or that I have my teams play is like music that makes an argument, and it's something that can be extended by like a first negative rebuttal or a first affirmative rebuttal, as this is a card that was dropped, this is a piece of evidence that was dropped, and this is the explanation of it, this is the author, and this is the qualification of the author, and this is why it is relevant to this debate round, and this is why it should be voted on. And so a lot of times we won a lot of debates, and I would say that McDonogh was probably the first team that won the Tournament of Champions based off of the music. Yeah. So if you look at the final round of McDonogh when we debated Peninsula, like you see, like we used music and we used songs and all that became relevant to winning the debate round. Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I would love to dive into more of the McDonough run to the finals in a minute. I did want to ask you though, so a lot of debaters today still kind of run an argument about the three-tiered method, and that that was the first time it had ever been run in debate. In fact, it was kind of academically created by you and your squad. Is that accurate?
Well, so the three-tier method was Louisville. And that was me and Dr. Warner. And I would say, and to be honest, and I'm not just saying this just because like of Dr. Warner's position in debate, but he brought me on to kind of like give him that intuition. And so it's like the three-tier methodology was more of a Louisville approach to debate, but then we took that and instead of arguing that a three-tier methodology needs to be incorporated, we just kind of incorporated that and then just made the music kind of like the argument. And that was kind of what McDonogh did, years later. Yeah.
And then I guess when we're already talking about arguments and argumentative innovation, um, would you mind talking about your theory of revolutionary fiat that your teams have executed?
Yeah. So when you say revolutionary fiat, it's performative revolutionary fiat to me, PRF. And performative revolutionary fiat is kind of like, and I'm actually gonna I'm actually glad I'm here because this is the book that we use. It's called Revolutionary Suicide by Huey P. Newton. And revolutionary fiat came about is that I kind of think of what is the United States federal government and how do we invoke a U.S. federal government response? And if the Constitution says we the people of the United States do ordain or establish this Constitution, then really a representative democracy means that the government represents the people. and that the people can choose their own initiative through like a form of protest. So performative revolutionary fiat is really just a protest where the people act as the government to do a specific policy.
And that has inroads in order to access what would in traditional forms be called, topical action, because you're making some sort of a demand that would create topical change or interact with the government in a manner that would demand such change.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And the thing that you say makes me want to emphasize topical action because like so many teams think that to be non-topical is the answer. And I think that you have to have a different version of what is considered topical in order to still resonate with a lot of judges. And so I'm not for abandoning the topic, but reformulating the topic to the way that you want to debate, I think is better. So I like that emphasis that it's still topical, but it's just a different version of topicality.
Great. So in terms of your career in debate, I guess as a coach, so from 1992, even though there were some years in and out until today, what are some of your favorite moments that you've had in your coaching career, and what were those like?
I mean, obviously with the University of Louisville, I mean, just that whole year was spectacular for me. And one thing that a lot of people don't realize is that Elizabeth Jones, who was considered her and Tanya Green were considered like two outstanding debaters that year, but me and Elizabeth Jones didn't get along that well, and our record like kind of formulated us to a bond to where I became a trustworthy individual and she became a trustworthy individual because we were so good together. And that kind of helped. And then obviously McDonogh's win meant a lot. And the Coups win. Gabriel Coup and Michael Coup for Centennial High School was the first time I ever won the TOC. And that was a big deal. And I remember their switch, they had a traditional AF, and then they had to switch because their affirmative became non-inherent, and so they switched and they started reading their tags all in Korean, and that made a difference in the debate, and then they did well, and so that was a big year too. Yeah.
Um, Now, as a coach, have you enjoyed more the debating aspect? Do you miss that, or do you prefer coaching and teaching and things like that?
To be honest, because my debate career wasn't as successful as coaching, so coaching is obviously better for me, and so I just love to see like the participants get meaning out of the debate, even like the McDonogh team this year, rising back up, to top 30 in the country, was remarkable, and so they were like real excited about that, and I'm always excited about that. So I think coaching has been bigger to me than participating. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I think that was the same for me. I've definitely feel the same way. I
I'm
love
not as successful as you, Josh, but
stuff. That's not true. Two ones or 2-1. Uh, in terms of uh, the community, like what do you think about the state of debate right now? I know mostly, you and I interact in the high school community now and don't find ourselves as many college tournaments, but um, you know, with all of the challenges that are happening right now politically, with the emergence of artificial intelligence, like what role do you think our community should or could play kind of moving forward?
so I mean, there's a lot of things, and to me, I love the shift in the community and how they vote. Like you see, like in my days, I think performative debate was a lot more exciting and took a lot more credence and credibility, and you had a lot more top teams that were performative than you have now. And I think we're moving more toward traditional, which I think is good. I think the shift is good. Um, like the peninsulas, the MBAs that that you have, the Westwoods, of today are a lot more successful than, I mean, Berkeley Prep is number one right now, but I mean they can go either way. But like McDonogh is crawling back up the food chain. I love that. I love that. And I love that style of debate that can change. And that's the thing I love the most about debate is that the style can always change. The one thing that I'm kind of indifferent of is like I don't think the resolution should be abandoned, but I think the resolution should be reinterpreted often. So like teams that say like being non-topical is good, I'm kind of like six in one hand, half dozen in the other. I think that what they really want to say is that the resolution can be reinterpreted because the way you debate defines what is topical. And I think they just need to come up with new artistic ways to interpret the topic that I think is better. But, other than that, I think debate is competitive and I just love it. I love it.
On
And
that
I think
note
that
of kind of, go ahead, sorry.
no, I just think that traditional teams are ahead right now, and I think that the performative teams are it's like traditional and the performative, and then it's coming it's coming up because I
I
think
did want to
cancel.
ask about, oh yeah, yeah. Um, I did want to ask about kind of like the changing state of debate. Do you have any like kind of hopes for where that it may go in the coming years or any predictions? I know you talked about kind of like the balance between like performative and traditional debate.
See, I love the fact that debate is circular. And I think debate really should be circular. It's kind of like, and I'm gonna do something small and brief that it really wasn't that big of a change, but like Roger Salt, who was the coach at Kentucky for a long period of time, like came up with dispositionality to like refute conditionality. But now we've come back full circle where conditionality is the argument that people read against counterplans, and people don't really talk about dispositionality anymore. But it's like debate has that innovative way of thinking in which new types of argumentation can always arise, and we go back to the old forms, and I love that circular logic of debate.
In terms of schools and culture and debate and the way that debate curriculum comes in, we've dealt since the start of COVID with a shrinking of overall programs, both in college and in high school. Um, what part of the culture there at McDonogh does debate have, and what makes it a special place where you have consistently had very good teams and a good group doing the activity?
Um, it's kind of interesting because McDonough has kind of had a longevity of debate, and usually that's because of funding, because somebody has come in and like really had a vested interest in debate and funded the program very well. And but since I've been here, I feel like you have to have a coach that is willing to travel, that's willing to take teams out, that's invested in the activity, that really has a passion for debate. Because before I came here, I want to say that McDonough was alive in like local travel. The what they call the BCFL, the Baltimore Catholic Forensic League, which has the National Catholic Forensic League Championship. And that's not to say that that's a small deal, but really weren't traveling nationally. But when I came, I wanted to take that budget and travel out nationally and have encouraged a lot of kids to travel out nationally. Not being married, not having kids, I mean, that has a lot to do with it. But I know there are a lot of coaches out there, including yourself, Josh, that are married with kids that travel and that's extensive. And I think that's important. I think you have to have a coach that's passionate with the activity as well as a funder. And luckily, our school was very supportive of that and has been very thankful for the opportunities that they've given me, as I've been thankful for the opportunities that they've given me. So, I think that's worked both ways, and I think you know, we're good on that. And I feel like even though there has been a lot of demise in debate, like our program has grown since COVID, and it's kind of like teetered off, and now as kids are starting to see how competitive and how much travel and how much time is committed, it's almost like a sport, that they're kind of like six in one hand, half dozen in the other, and so we're McDonogh used to be like one team travels all. We have like six teams travel to a tournament, which was huge. So, we've seen an increase, but I know I agree with you. A lot of teams have seen a decrease. Like the Glenbrooks have seen decreases, but then I saw a lot of teams from Glenbrook North were traveling to Michigan. So, I thought that was big.
Yeah, I'm hopeful. Like I think the retraction and shrinking that happened with COVID, like I feel like we're bouncing back, but I do like to hear good stories that things are growing. So that's wonderful. Um, in terms of debate as an activity, um, why I guess if we're selling this activity to the outside world, from your perspective, why is debate the answer? Why should we be wanting kids to do debate heading into the immediate future?
Oh, I love that question. And to me, and I'd say this from a lot of the graduates from McDonogh that are extremely bright students that have done successfully well and have kept their grades up and have gone on to like colleges like Harvard, like Dartmouth, like Michigan. So, and the list goes on and on. Like we haven't had any kid that I think has fallen by the wayside here at McDonogh. And the reason why is because debate is one of those activities where it gives you the chance to do something intellectually that doesn't cost you outside of your school. Like a lot of kids like take something that they've researched and do a research paper or articulate this in class. And I think that if you have smart, intelligent, bright kids, they'll do that. And you should encourage them to do that. And so like I don't really like invest a whole lot of time in practice like a football team or a basketball team would, but a lot of kids do dualistic coverage in their debate in their school, and I think that's great. And it's worked out well for us. And and no kid has fallen behind scholastically, which I think is good. But I do think that if you debate, I tend to think that that's one of the only things that you should be able to do, you know. Like it's hard to play tennis or play basketball and debate. So yeah,
Yeah, I'd echo that. Like I think my favorite thing about our activity is how hard it is. And
yeah,
so when like obviously there's trade-off there with accessibility and how many people can access it. But I do love that there is an activity out there that is so hard that it does require kind of all of you to be successful and to engage. And not that everyone has to be, make it all of themselves, but for those that do, that there's an avenue of growth inside of the activity for that type of commitment.
mhm.
Um, so as a very successful coach over the last, let's see, you're telling me 33 years.
Yeah. God, it seems so long.
I'm not far behind. What like what are some things that you would attribute your success and long-standing commitment and really becoming a figurehead for this community? Um,
It's kind of funny because I attribute that to two things. First of all, you got to have people around you that are willing to commit to the activity that you committed to, and you have to find similar reasons for them to do that. And definitely not bragging on myself, but I consider myself like an academic individual. And so, like, how do you motivate academic individuals to participate in this activity the way you did and love this activity the way that you did? And and I know this sounds bad, but one thing is I love college debate. I love college debate, but I'm not so prone to influence my kids to participate in college, but participate in high school is something that, would you rather sit on a bench in football and basketball, or like go to tournaments and actually be good in debate? And a lot of academic kids find that welcome to be good in debate. And I think that has to come from the encouragement that you give them to show that this is a valuable activity, and that if they did want to debate in college, there's opportunity to debate in college. There's college scholarships. There's debate teams in college. There's a program in college, but they don't necessarily have to, but they want to be participant in school. And winning a national championship is big, and like Ryan James is one person that I would emphasize, who won the TSC for McDonogh, is like he's at Stanford Law right now. And he wanted to play basketball, but it's like, you're a heck of a debater, and the amount of encouragement that you have in debate can signify, getting a kid involved. And I think that was good for him in school, and now he's at Stanford Law.
And then on the flip side of that, kind of, what do you attribute to be um or what do you attribute to like a debater's success? Like any qualities or habits you see in debaters that you think are pretty important?
I mean, they definitely have to be. There's three things that I would say are fundamental. First of all, you have to be argumentative, and you have to and argumentative, not to the point where you're just like whistling Dixie and you just argue just to argue. Like, you actually have to find an end that relates to you and be able to argue that point. But second of all, I think you have to be well read. And I think that you have to be well read or be able to define arguments, even in poetry or in music or in anything that you read, and find like, what is that author trying to say? Who is that author and why are they saying that? And then I think you can't be shy. I think you have to be charismatic, and you have to be open, and you have to be willing to conversate, and willing to take a loss. I think that has a lot to do with the way that I teach at McDonogh, is that like you can't be like afraid to go 0-6 or 1-5 at a tournament if by your senior year you're 5-1 and winning that tournament, you know?
That's excellent advice. I think I'll definitely echo some of that to the to the kids, all of that. Um, so one of the things we would like to do as part of these podcasts is solicit if you have like a war story. Is there a debate round either that you participate in or that you coached that you would like rehash what happened in it and kind of tell me why that debate sticks out in your mind, why what was important, and don't feel like you have to spare any details here. Like people want to know.
So probably there's several that come to mind, but one that I could definitely say like shoots my brain was when Louisville debated Michigan State. Was a huge tournament. Michigan State was in the running for the Copeland, which is like to be the best team in college debate. And I remember the panel. I'm not gonna say any names of the panel, and it was a 2-1 decision, and it was for us. but I remember that decision took so long because one of the Michigan State debaters was practicing their speech for the next round and thought that, they were clearly going to win and everything. It was the 2-1 decision for us. And I just remember the joy of that debate was just so big, and it was like the shot heard around the world. And so that was tremendous. Yeah.
Well, that's great because I never beat that Michigan State team.
So you know what I was talking about.
I'm glad somebody did. I never did.
Yeah, that was the only time we beat them too. Yeah. I think they won the NDT that year too.
Yeah, they did. They did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It's been great.
Yeah,
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on.
we
Yeah.
really appreciate it. Thanks, Daryl.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah, thank you all for joining us on today's episode. You can find us on any podcast streaming platform, and we will be back soon with another episode. See you next time.